afternoon, everyone. This is a meeting of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Today is Monday, June 24th. First item on our agenda is consideration of the minutes from the June 8th, 2024 meeting. If there's a motion to consider those to approve. All right, second, so those minutes are approved. Our next item is, and this is new, is a new applicant for Loyalty Towing LLC. Just to note that, I'm not sure what happened there, but anyway. All right, let me try that again. The towing company permitting typically goes to the public safety and not to the transportation committee meeting, so this is the first one we've received.
Julie Bernard, I serve as Assistant City Attorney in the Office of City Attorney, that's loud too. And I believe since we've started with the new ordinance, there were some changes made. They do usually go to public safety. I think there was some, confusion in when we were doing the new ordinance, where that ordinance went. And I think it went primarily through the Transportation Committee on the towing, if I remember correctly. So, that's up to the counselors. If we also want to send it to public safety, we can do that, or it would be up to the council to determine which committee is going to hear the items.
No, I'm fine with that change. I just wanted to, this is like literally the first one I've seen since 2017. So, just, as long as, we're, it's, the procedure's okay and everybody's clear on it, that's fine.
Right. That's it. Generally, I don't think the ordinance, and I generally try not to put a committee into ordinances because those can change from time to time.
Okay.
So it's really up to the council. As long as it goes to a committee and the counselors are all, okay with that, this should be fine.
All right. So this being the first towing permit that we've reviewed, I assume that all of the same sorts of requirements are applicable for towing as for a certificate of public necessity. So, Officer Fikes, why don't you tell us more about this?
Yes, it's the same process, background check, which the applicant has completed. Unfortunately, I've not been able to reach the applicant in the last week and a half, and I started as of this morning calling him, and he still hasn't returned my phone call.
Okay. But conventional towing service, looks like he's got a couple of trucks.
Yes, it's going to be conventional towing service. And yes, he has a few trucks.
Yeah. I see that he's provided his insurance company and policy number. Okay.
So for a future reference, we're going to be moving them to public safety, or they're going to be staying here?
They can continue to come to transportation. I just wanted to make sure that we were, following protocol. So,
Yes, sir. Thank you.
all right.
So,
Council Woods.
are you saying you haven't had any contact with the owner at all?
I have had contact over the last week and a half. I started reaching it up because I knew the meeting was coming up, and he hasn't answered the phone or returned the phone calls.
Okay. I would probably delay this until we can,
Okay?
because we need, is he, I guess, gonna try to do consensual and non-consensual?
It's just consensual right now. That's the last time I talked to him, he said just consensual right now.
Is there separate licensing or permitting for non-consensual as well?
Well, they're supposed to select which one.
Counselor, it's all the same licensing. I did notice we spent considerable amount of time, I'm looking at Ms. Argo from Big Dot, we spent considerable amount of time working on, with multiple departments, working on the applications and all of that. And there are some questions on the application that someone has to answer if they're going to do non-consensual towing. I'd noticed those weren't answered, and that's why I talked to Officer Fikes about checking with him about what kind of towing service he was going to be. I did notice, I think one thing that I didn't see was we don't really have on the application for them to affirmatively say, I'm doing non-consensual or consensual or both or anything like that. And that might be something in the future we might want to tweak on the applications just so it's clear up front, because that was my question. My assumption was he was doing only consensual towing, and because he had not answered the questions about non-consensual, but would be nice to have that affirmative check off. And I looked at it after everything we did. I looked at it and went, well. So we'll work on that. But that was, I think, when Officer Pike started, reaching out to him. So.
Okay. Well, provided we haven't had any contact with the owner and he doesn't appear to be present, and we don't have clarity on that, I'm good with a delay if we want to do that.
All right, I move we delay this item to the next Transportation Committee meeting.
All right, second, so that item's delayed to the next Transportation Committee meeting. Next up, we have a cost-sharing agreement with the city of Mountain Brook relative to the roundabout at Cahaba Road. Colin Alexander.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Colin Alexander. I'm Senior Planner, Birmingham Department of Transportation. This is the first of 3 items before you guys that are basically redos that the council has already approved these and been through these, but we have to go back and amend them. So this first one, which is a cost-sharing agreement between the city of Mountain Brook on a roundabout project that they're doing at Cahaba Road. If you recall, in 2017, Mountain Brook was awarded a CMAQ grant to build a roundabout at the Cahaba Road intersection right adjacent to the Birmingham Zoo and Birmingham Botanical Gardens. And as part of that, we agreed to split the cost of the local match, 50-50, so 10% us, 10% Mountain Brook. The project is planning to be let later this summer, start construction later this year. However, the agreement expired at the end of 2023. So in order to move forward, all we have to do is just renew the agreement. There's no change to the agreement. It's just getting it back up to date so that they can move forward.
So this isn't the existing roundabout that's at the entrance to the zoo. This is
No,
further
this is the new
down.
one that they're going to build back
Right.
in the Lane Park area.
Right, okay, so. Yeah, the intersection of Cahaba Road and Lane Park Road.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, and so essentially the language is exactly the same. We're
It's the
just
same
amending the
language.
date.
It's the same. Everything is the same that the council has seen before. It's just that we're moving the date back because the agreements were only good for 4 years, and so it expired before we could get the project under construction. So we just have to renew that.
Okay. Are they still, yeah, I mean, assuming the agreement language is all the same, they're still planning to do the basically the figure eight
Yes.
arrangement, yeah. Okay.
This same situation for what, both of these? Or all three of
For
these?
all three, slightly different reasonings that I'll explain, but yeah, they're all things that the council has already seen, and we'll walk through them. But this one is the most straightforward. It's just changing the dates to say that it, we agree to it going forward.
All right, I move we recommend this to full council.
All right, second, so that item passes. Next item,
So the next item, if you guys recall, back in May, we came before your committee and then to the council for a grant application resolution for an ATIP grant. The purpose of this project was going to fill in the missing links in our bike network. And we identified 56 segments spread out across the city, every council district, where we could improve the connectivity in our bike and ped network. Since then, a couple of things have happened. The first is that the feds pushed the deadline back from June 17th to July 17th, which gave us some more breathing room to really put together a solid application. But when we came before you guys, the NOFO requires for construction projects a minimum construction size of $15 million. And based off of our initial rough estimates, we thought we could do the project within $15 million. So we asked the council at that 80-20 match, asked $12 million from the feds plus a $3 million match from the city. As we've delved into that with a more detailed budget, we're realizing the project is probably going to be closer to about $18.5 to $19 million. So that's the first thing that has changed. The other part that has changed is that with a number of these federal grants here as part of the infrastructure bill, if your project is within an area of persistent poverty, you don't have to provide the 20% match. This grant was a little more stringent. You had to actually prove that the majority of census tracts that the project touched had a poverty rate of 40% or higher. And so as part of our research, we were able to determine that the majority of the project is in census districts that either have 40% poverty rates or within the margin of error. So with that in mind, we no longer have to meet that 20% match threshold that we did when we first started the grant application. So what we're coming before you is, in terms of amending the resolution that you already passed, we are still recommending a $3 million commitment from the city. There's only $45 million nationally for this program. Even if we aren't required having some local money, and it makes us very competitive on a national stage. So we're recommending the same amount that we've asked council to approve locally, but we are going to amend the federal ask from 12 million to 16 million. So that'll be a total of $19 million.
yeah. That makes sense. Just increase the scale of the project.
Exactly. Well, the scale is the same. It's just that with construction and more detailed cost estimates.
Okay, so this
So
wouldn't.
we're not adding any sections that weren't part of it before. We're just getting a much more detailed cost estimate and being more accurate with our ask.
Got it. Okay, that's a pretty easy amendment.
Will we recommend this item to full council?
All right, second, so that ATIP resolution amendment is approved and recommended to the full council. Next is another cost-sharing agreement with the city of Mountain Brook relative to Montclair Road.
Yes, so for this one, back in either December or right at the 1st of 2024, I can't exactly recall, we have a local project that we're working on to fix the drainage ditch and actually pipe it adjacent to Ramsey Park on Montclair Road. At the same time, the city of Mountain Brook has been awarded a TAP grant to build a sidewalk along Montclair Road, and part of that project was going to cross over Birmingham city limits adjacent to Ramsey Park to get to the other part of the Mountain Brook city limits and connect two parts of the sidewalk network in Mountain Brook. That was getting kind of complicated for Mountain Brook because there is an open ditch. They had to move pretty far into park right-of-way, which was going to trigger a lot of environmental reviews, adding cost to the project. So Mountain Brook came to us wanting to know if they contributed to our local project, if we would include the sidewalk in our local project and move it into the Birmingham right-of-way, out of the park right-of-way, and they would take that part out of their TAP project. So we worked through an agreement, went to council, it was approved. However, the version of the agreement that was passed by Mountain Brook City Council was not the same as what was passed from our council. There was some language that we require that was not included in the Mountain Brook ordinance. And so we pulled back, went back to the drawing board, had their legal team, our legal team consult. And so what's before you is an agreement that's been more thoroughly vetted, so we're not going to have that same mistake. No difference in the cost share amount. Mountain Brook is going to be contributing to our project for, I think it was like, I forget exactly, I think it's $50,000 for the sidewalk.
Okay, and there's no existing sidewalk there currently?
That's correct. So we're gonna do all the work. We're going to, restore the roadway, pipe the ditch, and then put the sidewalk over top of that and tie that sidewalk into their TAP project.
And this is along Montclair Road or Country Club Road?
Along Montclair Road. So on the northern border of the park.
Is it gonna tie into the adjacent development? I mean, because there aren't sidewalks along that segment of Montclair Road currently.
So that's the TAP grant. So we have just the part of Montclair there right adjacent to the park. Either side of that is Mountain Brook. Mountain Brook is building the sidewalk along Montclair as part of the TAP grant.
Got you.
And the TAP grant was originally going to come through our jurisdiction, and what we're doing is making it easier for everybody by pulling the sidewalk into our project, and Mountain Brook is paying us to do that work.
Got you. All right.
Good explanation.
Thank you.
Move we send this to the full council.
All right, second, so that item is recommended to the full
Awesome.
council for approval.
Thank you.
Next up, I wanted to ask Julie Bernard and Christina Argo to come and just talk to the issue, speak to the issue of image-based private fee notices on private parking lots. I had a inquiry from an individual who received a notice in the mail that looked a lot like a parking ticket with images of their vehicle. So when this came up in our public hearings during all of the conversation about amending our ordinances, kind of weren't real clear about what to do with it, whether it was legal. So let's kind of just talk that out.
Okay, Counselor, and I also have Attorney Joe Basquier with me. He's our chief prosecutor in municipal court, and we've been talking a lot, about these issues. And it's sort of a gray area, and we have been talking and debating back and forth what to do. At the time that last year when we were passing the new private parking lot and towing ordinance, the ones that we were seeing at the time, these notices, some of them actually did look like parking tickets. Some of them, I had seen one that had an envelope with it that said parking ticket enclosed and some things like that. So what we're talking about, and I don't remember the code section off the top of my head, is a provision in Alabama criminal law that makes it illegal to simulate legal process. So if you send something that makes somebody think, like there's some official governmental action or they've already filed some kind of legal proceedings, it doesn't prohibit somebody who is doing a collection, doing an honest debt collection. There's I have some heartburn. There's a way to get somebody fined for trespass parking under state law and under city ordinance, by getting a police officer to ticket them and, or, you know, making a complaint to the court and getting, a summons issued, and you can get, you know, a fine. In this case, there is also a fine line about contract. You know, when you're supposed to pay for parking, that's a contract formation. And there's some authority that, you know, they could be able to enforce on the basis if there's a contract being formed or someone's ignoring a contract. That was actually originally the basis for the booting ordinance, the original booting ordinance that we had. It was like, well, you know, if there's something up that says you have to pay and you don't pay, you've ignored the contract for that lot. And the people were doing the boot. So, you know, we've got kind of a similar situation here. A lot of these lots that are doing this payment, I'll give you that state law code section 13A-10-131. Simulating legal process, and it's you commit the crime of simulating legal process if you knowingly deliver or cause to be delivered to another person any demand, request, or claim for the payment of money or the delivery or transfer of property that in form and substance simulates any legal process issued by any court of this state. And it does point out in the commentary to that code section that the primary evil sought was to be prevented is the sending of a dun by a creditor or bill collector, which is calculated to mislead the debtor into thinking that legal proceedings have been instituted against him. It is not essential, however, that there be a debtor-creditor relation, as the section is sufficiently broad to cover other relationships, for example, bailor-bailee, landlord-tenant, etc. So it requires a specific mental state for the sender and eliminate the possibility of violation of section simply because the recipient misunderstands a simple request for the payment of a debt or return of property. So, you know, there's still, you know, we're seeing various forms of these notices that are going out. And it is still somewhat gray. Definitely we say no if it looks like a ticket, you know, if it looks like you're trying to make out that something governmental is being done. I mean, we've seen one that the name of the company is Municipal Parking something, you know, that has something that looks like an official seal. Those kinds of things are concerns. But, you know, what we know, I've seen the particular notice that you know, received the complaint about, and we know that those tickets are happening in the lots that are at City Walk. And so that's controlled by Birmingham Jefferson Civic Center Authority, BJCC, not the city. We've gotten complaints to BDOT. We've gotten complaints. We've even had the first one we found out about at this location was from one of the towing contractors that the person called their office. You know, they had nothing to do with it. So and we've gotten them in OCA. So, you know, the thing is, if somebody's, you know, has a complaint about it, it's BJCC's authority, you know, their contract for those parking lots. So the lots, Ms. Argo has talked with BJCC about the signage at the lots, which is not in conformance with the new ordinance. There is language on signage there about that you could be charged up to a $250 additional fee. But it's on a sign that's on the back side that you see when you're leaving.
Right.
There's only a QR code, you know, essentially at the front that somebody sees when they're pulling in. A lot of complaints I've heard, people have thought that they're city lots and there's not a charge on weekends, which is not correct. And if you look at that fine print on the other side, clearly says no free parking at any time. So we're working with BJCC to get more upfront signage so that to avoid any mistakes, because it's very similar to the mistakes that we were trying to solve with the new ordinance and the new signage.
So my main question is what is the legal authority? Are you saying that if the owner of a property, any property, posts a notice on the property that if you enter into the property that you're entering into a contract, is there a state statute that establishes that the owner of a property has the ability to establish and enforce a contract in that way?
To my knowledge, there is not.
So we're not clear about the legal basis of, you know, if I own a piece of property and, you know, a person enters onto that property, we don't know yet what authorizes, you know, me to make a demand of that person entering my property. So that's problematic.
I don't disagree with you, Counselor. So,
And here's one of the reasons why I think it's especially problematic is because the way this is being done is automated through cameras. And it was made very clear to us, especially through the efforts of Councilor Woods, that the Jefferson County delegation, at least the majority of them, don't have any interest in, you know, automated systems for traffic enforcement. So to me, the difference between what they don't want and what's in place on private property, there's almost no difference in my mind, except that it's one's on private property and the other would be in the public right of way. So that's another reason why it's problematic.
I do understand the concern. We are preparing to send out a letter telling people they can't send out notices that definitely appear to be tickets or anything that would violate the code section that I read. We are continuing to look at the issue.
So for the people who have received tickets, you know, I guess the threat is that if you don't, I mean, I just used the wrong terminology. For the people who receive notices, you know, I guess what they're thinking is, okay, I mean, there's the thing that if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, is probably a duck, but in this case, it's not a duck. The fear is that there's going to be some repercussion if people fail to comply with the notice.
I think most of the notices, and there was a woman who spoke to the council during the proceedings on adopting the ordinance about doing these tickets, and I think the consequence, I won't say threat, the consequences that they say is they will put it on your credit, that they will put it against your credit report. Or at least that's what they say, but I understand what you're saying is the appearance of there may be some other sort of legal consequence. So the examples of notices we've seen are kind of all over the place, from one that really looks like a ticket to one that sort of looks more like the example you forwarded, but has more language that looks like ticket and violation and things like that used on it, versus the particular one that you forwarded. It actually has a sentence in there that points out that we're not a governmental entity. There's some language in there. So that's why it's hard to distinguish exactly where that line is.
Yeah.
So.
I guess, another, so apparently the entity in this situation that's contracted to what looks like and sounds like enforcement, on BJCC's property, is based in Colorado. So, I'm just wondering, like, if you don't pay it, if you go to Colorado and you get pulled over, is there going to be a warrant for your arrest? Or I don't know. It's just messy.
I don't think that's the consequences, I think that notice clearly states, I'd have to pull it back up and look at it again, but, that it could be reported on your credit. That particular one does have a way to dispute, and I think several of the ones I've seen have a way to dispute or contest, the,
Yeah, I mean, and I'm wondering, if without any record of a contract, can anyone just say, hey, you owe me money, and if you don't pay me, I'm gonna, make a report to the credit agencies that you owe me money that you haven't paid. I mean, where's the legality of that?
yeah, I have pulled some cases. We've been looking at some other information as to, really where is the authority to do this clearly, but, that's kind of the basis that it's rooted in, is that there's forming a contract. Now, I do agree that in the particular situation we're talking about, it is not clearly upfront, when somebody pulls in, it's there at the exits, but a lot of people are taking the kids to the playground or whatever, not stopping and reading a sign with a bunch of fine print, which was one of the reasons we did away with the interior sign on parking lots where towing was occurring. That was intended to be at the point that you had to physically go to pay. So there was some chance that somebody was going to read it, but with everything being mobile now, there's less chance that somebody's getting out and actually reading. There are people, I've had complaints from people who've received notices in other lots that had QR codes, and they were older. They didn't know what to do with a QR code, when they
Right.
parked. So,
I will
yeah.
chime in. Just from a kind of a public awareness standpoint, I think we're talking about a lot of confusion and differences of how people get notified and how things are enforced. But I think one thing that could be helpful from the city standpoint is if we do some public service announcements around, remember, there is no free parking. I think a lot of folks, just because our downtown has changed a lot in the last 10 or 15 years, and it really was more sleepy, and you could find free parking and it was not an issue. Well, now we've got a lot of stuff happening. We've got a lot more activities downtown. Parking lots are monitored or signed, so I think putting out some information related to, before you walk away, make sure you've paid, because there is no free parking, something like that, because I just think our local residents are not maybe used to things escalating the way they have, so.
Right. That's a great suggestion, and I agree that, that's something that we can do.
And I think as we continue to work through our parking reform policy, you guys are gonna see some things coming out in the next few weeks related to that. All of that public service information stuff we'll be working on that in conjunction with policy changes. So we can certainly kind of pull all of this together and get a plan where maybe we're communicating it, steadily every month or something, with it just kind of a same message, but maybe something a little bit different and unique so people will pay attention, because people don't read, we know. Certainly don't read fine print this big. But
Yeah, and that's sort of the basis of my concern. I mean, I guess when you think about it, some of these contractual agreements are increasingly based on something other than, you know, like a signature. Like you go to the grocery store now, you know, and to pay for your groceries, you hold your phone, you know, up to the reader or whatever, or hold your card to the reader or put it in a slot, or, you know, if you're shopping online, you're pressing, you know, a button. It's not a button, it's a, but anyway, a
Yeah, the
clickable
physical-
link.
yeah.
So, I mean,
I mean,
entering onto a property could be interpreted as, you know, like a analog equivalent of entering into agreement, but it sounds like nobody's really established that that's been spelled out anywhere.
Well, there are contracts that can be formed by actions, you know, and not necessarily, there are only certain forms of contracts that are required to be in writing. But that's a conversation. Your concerns, we'll take your concerns back and discuss those.
Councilor Woods?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess my thing is more around this, the predatory feel of, you know, you got a space that's free one day and then, you know, you put a sign that is designed to not be seen. It feels like, you know, if you're announcing to people that you have to pay if you come in, it makes sense that the sign was to be visible as you come in.
I can comment a little bit on the signage. For the past 6 months, I've been reviewing signs from private companies that are going on these private parking lots. I've been really surprised by the lack of knowledge and experience that some of these companies have in picking the appropriate spot for signage. It really was eye-opening. There was a lot of just no thought to how a car or how a pedestrian could see a sign or where is the most appropriate place for a sign. So our department has made a lot of suggestions related to these parking lot site plans we've been looking at. And so I do feel like things are better, you know, as far as where new signs have gone out and where they're placed, because it was really a little haphazard before, so.
Well, I mean, does this company have a business license here?
Sir?
Does the company that is doing the parking monitoring, do they have a business license here?
In this case, it would be the BJCC who's in charge of the signage, right?
That's right.
So is this just like a software thing, or is this a company operating in Birmingham?
They're all a little different. Sometimes it's software. What we're seeing is there could be a parking management company, but then they also have a subcontractor that, you know, is the one who's actually sending out the notices, you know, and typically it's the property owner who hires a parking management company, and then they are the ones who handle signage and enforcement. And then sometimes that also involves a towing company, and maybe another company that sends out these notices.
Well, I'm just saying they should have a business license if they're operating here. And yeah, I don't know if that's maybe a gap we had, because I know we were focusing on towing around signage, but whether or not they should be charging what they're charging, that's one thing. But it should be clear that you have to pay to park here. Like, it shouldn't be. That's not a hidden thing, you know. It's and I think we need to look at that part. Needs to be. I guess, what is their response? You say, and kind of having those conversations with them around, do they agree with what we're saying, or are they saying?
I was going to, address, we can look into whether or not the companies have business licenses, and that's one piece that we've not looked at on all of them. Some of them I think they have, because I was familiar with them showing up before, but we do need to look at that. So I thank you for that reminder. And I know, in this, Ms. Argo's been working with all the lots, around the city. But, this particular one, I know she had some recent conversations about getting it. It is, that when you pull in, there is a sign with a QR code that says pay to park here. But, yeah, we went to a lot of effort last year in working out signs that tell people why, what are the reasons you can park here? And what times can you do it? And some things like that, to have that up front when people drove in, because we felt that was a lot of the driving factor behind complaints we were getting about towing, was it was confusing to people as to what were the conditions under which they could park at that location. So we've made a huge effort, with the signs that the council approved that are bright and catch your eye up front. So that, that was the piece we tried to address. This is sort of a nondescript blue sign with a QR code on it. It does say pay here, and I think there is a phone number or, something to text or something on it. And then on the back side, behind that sign facing into the parking lot is a red sign with white print that talks about all these other terms, including that you could be charged an additional fee and all of that. So, and it does say, no free parking at any time, but it's not when the person makes the choice to go into the lot. And so that's something that I think we felt very strongly in getting that new ordinance through, was to have people on notice when they make the choice to drive into that lot. Of course, Officer Fikes has gone out and looked at a complaint downtown that I'm like calling or texting with him while he's, physically out there, that, they said, well, there was no signage. Well, where they parked, they had to drive by a sign right here. And they parked, where they parked is just a few spaces down from that sign that was there, that was not that hard to miss. So it was the old style parking sign, but some people just sometimes don't see signs, even when they're right there.
And to address your question about have folks been cooperative, yeah, we've had a lot of folks be very cooperative. And then there's been some folks that it's just taken a little bit longer to get things proofed and okayed and squared away. So it's, we're getting closer every day. But some of the most high profile problematic lots have the signs up. So if you guys drive around North Side, those signs are in place, which is good.
It's your third year of focusing on signs, so keep up the good work.
I dream about signs now, so.
All right. I think that's it. Thank you guys for providing information.
Again,
Colin, if you got a minute, I got a question for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, what I keep hearing about the particular situation we're talking about is people have assumed that is city parking, and it is not. And so that's, I think, a clear message that we want out there.
Okay, thanks. I got an inquiry earlier today, and I'm looking on the map just to make sure that I've got the location right. So the inquiry was that the intersection signal at 3rd Avenue North and 12th Street. So I believe that is a exit off of I-65, that you come off the exit and you terminate into the intersection with, or you come to the intersection with 12th Street. Mm-hmm. And that, there's no, it's a dumb signal. So it's strictly operating on timing and not detecting any vehicles. And so you have a very high volume traffic thoroughfare that's emptying, onto a low traffic street. And there's a signal light there that's stopping people, when there's oftentimes no traffic coming from either direction. So Third Avenue North and 12th Street, if you could look into that one. And then, although it doesn't get talked about much, parts of the Greystone area are in the city of Birmingham. And I got an inquiry today about a segment of road, and I'm looking for the email. Brook Highland Drive. So the section of Brook Highland Drive between Highway 119 and I think it's Club Way or Club Drive, something like that. Apparently that segment of Brook Highland Drive is in the city of Birmingham, and is in need of repair. So
Okay.
that's, Counselor Williams' district, and I included him on the response, basically telling people the council doesn't, weigh in on those, which streets get paved, but, anyway, wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Any new or old business? All right. Okay. All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.